I've had a chance to sit down and play Striving for Light Survival for a few hours thanks to Keymailer, and what I think sets this game apart from other games similar to it, like Vampire Survivors for example, is that the skill tree here is procedurally generated. The more levels I get by collecting the drops of slain enemies, the more skills I can unlock. And the more skills I unlock, the more the tree continues to expand outwards. With no 2 times will it ever be the same. Typically when leveling up in games like this, I'm presented with one of 3 options. But here I have a lot more freedom to create the builds that I want. But at the same time, it's also not quite that simple. Each tree generates with a limited amount of skills to pick from, so I'll never have access to every skill that I've unlocked, but I can influence which ones appear on the tree in any given run by picking them before loading into the map. Just that each one I pick also grants an initial starting debuff to the stats, which in all honesty is usually still worth it. The debuff only really feels impactful for the first couple rounds, and it usually doesn't matter at all after the first level or 2. So once you've gotten to level 3 or 4, you don't really notice it anymore. I mean, if going for a complex and late game powerful build where you've chosen a whole bunch of skills, things might be a bit challenging to pull off the first few rounds. Another thing that this game does differently is that I've got both melee and ranged weapons, and they activate at the same time, striking in front and shooting projectiles. What I found challenging about this in the beginning is that typically you choose where you aim, but in here it just targets whatever enemy seems to be the closest, at least most of the time, while other times it kind of feels pretty random. But I've only ever found this to be frustrating in the early game, as later on the upgrades typically have projectiles firing in every direction anyways. And then, my favorite part of the game. The unlockables. There's a huge variety of different skills and melee and ranged weapons, and each weapon comes with its own stats and modifiers, and they have a huge variety of different skills that complement all sorts of different styles and weapons, and under normal circumstances this could feel overwhelming, but you can also hover your mouse over anything that you haven't unlocked and it shows you what you need to be able to do to get them. And I really like that this gives something else to strive for on top of getting the highest score. There are still a lot of other neat little features that this game has, but these are the really big ones that I feel really sets it apart from other games like it. While this style of ARPG isn't typically the kind of game I usually go for, I can definitely see this one standing, maybe not as a top tier ARPG, but it definitely still holds its own.